Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by Scott, Alex, Lance, and Marcel, and we're going to talk about something very disappointing. 9 years ago today, the expanded universe was announced to be being decanonized and discontinued on StarWars.com's website, which is quite disappointing. And so we're going to kind of reflect on that, discuss what's happened. I know a lot of people here have, Alex and Lance at least, have already made videos talking a bit about this today. But we're going to just kind of share some of our thoughts and have a discussion about what will happen in the future and what's kind of happened over these past 9 years without the expanded universe. So how's everyone feeling today?
Doing great.
I'm all right. I have a lot of homework to do, but I chose this instead. It's all right.
This
Wise choice.
This is homework. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
This is a grade.
Indeed. So I was not around when it was decanonized. I think Scott and Marcel were aware of what was going on. What was you guys' original reaction back in 2014 when this announcement occurred?
Well, I knew it was coming. I mean, I had followed the licensing after the buyout. Really, you knew that Del Rey was keeping the license, right? So their books remained in production, and they sort of changed some of those ongoing projects into the new canon novels. The A New Dawn was supposed to be an expanded universe novel. Lords of the Sith, Tarkin, those were kept on their schedule, but they might have been modified to some extent to fit the new canon. But we know with Dark Horse, I mean, Randy Stradley put out a lot of information on when his company had the rights for and what their projects, what they were going to decide to do about those during their final months. And we could see the writing on the wall. So April, I mean, was kind of the drop dead date for that. Yes, they put out this video declaring that Lucasfilm's official policy that this expanded universe was not continuing, but really, truth be told, we knew that already. And my experience of it was, oh well, you know, this saga that I've been following for so many years, you know, it's officially done. Like, they officially did this. And my thought right from day one was, we got to get this continued somehow. We got to get them to change their mind in any way we can kind of come up with an idea. The problem with that over the years, of course, is we've kind of divided over the years and splintered off into a lot of different factions. Some people have dropped off entirely. Some people have come back. And really, there's not been a united front in terms of strategy, tactics. And I think to some extent, we've kind of made a bad image of ourselves in not adopting the right strategy in certain cases, and in other cases not. But it's been a long road, man. Marcel?
So for me, I think I was less keyed in than you were at the time, Scott. So it was kind of, for me, it was two stages. There was the acquisition, and then there was the decanonization. So with the acquisition, I remember where I was working at the time, there was this older lawyer, and he was a big Star Wars fan, but like, I guess what you would consider a normie. And he said, "This is perfect. Can't wait. Pump out Star Wars movies. I want tons of them. I want a movie on Boba Fett. I want a movie on this. I want a movie on that." And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, I don't know, that doesn't really sound right to me. I don't think I like those ideas whatsoever. And that was, I think, a year or two before decanonization. I saw the writing on the wall, but I guess I wasn't expecting it as much as Scott was. And so when they finally announced it, I remember a friend sent me the article because, again, I was at work. And I must have read it at like something like 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. It was just around lunchtime. And I remember getting home later that day and like looking at my bookshelf and being like, well, I guess all this was for nothing. That was my first thought. Like that was the first thing that popped into my head. Because back then I thought Lucasfilm dictated how I felt about certain works. It's only since then that I've adopted this view that, you know, corporations can say whatever they want about canon, but that has no bearing on the quality of the content itself. So back in the day when they had said, we're rebranding this as Legends and we're doing our own thing, I was never happy about that news. I wasn't excited about new Star Wars products. I was really comfortable with the expanded universe. I wanted that to stick around. Yeah, and then I don't know. It was a grim few years for me. And I tried the new stuff. I did. I think I gave it the college try, as they say, and it just wasn't the same as the old stuff. And it was, I think Surfer76 put out a video today, and he was talking about his own experience and how he like boxed up all of his Legend stuff for a while. And I had the exact same experience. Like that's exactly what happened to me. Is like I put the books at the back of my shelves and I covered them with other books and just couldn't look at them because it was just a stark reminder of how much I had lost. And then Rise of Skywalker was finally, I think, The Last Jedi for a lot of people was the one that kind of did them in and they went back to the expanded universe. That just made me just dislike Star Wars completely. And then it was Rise of Skywalker, which I said, okay, well, I'll watch the last one because I've watched the first two. And that's what got me back into the expanded universe in like a big bad way. And then after that, it's just been years, and the last 3 years have been just nonstop expanded universe consumption. So that's sort of my journey, and that's what I've been doing since decanonization.
Yeah. Lance, you put out was it a stream or a video? I don't remember, called Hope, where you discuss some of your thoughts about this.
It was a pre-recorded video. Yeah. For the past couple of years, I've used this day not as a day of mourning. I don't believe in that, because is the EU dead? Absolutely not. You mourn over things that are dead, that are legends.
Yeah.
But I don't view it like this, and that's why. And I made a similar message last year on Instagram. This isn't about mourning or being sad or weeping. No, this isn't like that. This is, and I pointed out in the video, if there's anything this day did for us 9 years ago, for you, Scott and Marcel, you guys, were aware at the time, but now we're a part of it. It's just united us. And Scott, you've mentioned there are different factions now, but we're really just kind of divided over what we should do now and in the future. But we all want to celebrate the EU. I think ultimately what it all did was it gave us more of a reason to celebrate the EU, to remember it. Because at this point, I think maybe I'm in the phase of just keeping its legacy alive. Because, that's why I'm always calling, the new canon out on the way they're treating our characters. Because I don't want that to be the... I don't know what the word would be like, but I don't want Thrawn in the new canon to be the Thrawn people think about. I want the EU Thrawn to be what is thought about when you think of Thrawn.
Agreed.
I want the Thrawn that we see, invading Coruscant in The Last Command. That's the Thrawn I want people to think about. When people think about Dirge, I don't want them to think about the Dirge that we see in the new canon, where he loses to a bunch of bounty hunters and smugglers. No, I want to see the Dirge that survived numerous attacks from Obi-Wan Kenobi.
The Jedi killer Dirge.
Yes, that's what I wanted people to see. I want the Jedi killer. That's who I want people to see.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of other things that characters I've missed. Pelion is, now he's seen as just a typical arrogant Imperial. I don't want people to see that. I want people to see the Watson-like Pelion from the old EU, which is what he was based on. Same with Thrawn was based off Sherlock, Pelion based on Watson. That's why I do that. And I see where people come from when they disagree, but that's why I do that, because I'm pointing people towards the old stuff, how these characters originally were in their original incarnations. So if there's anything that this day is, it's all about for us, it's unity. And I think just the 5 of us, and if Chris was here, 6 of us, this is a perfect example. We all have our own opinions about the EU. We all have different books we like more than others, comics, and we're all different ages. But we all love it, right?
Yeah.
And that's why this day, I kind of like this day, because it's all about celebrating the EU, the unity we have as fans, and continuing. We need more unity. Because yeah, Scott, you're right. There are so many factions now. I'm not going to name names, but I think we all know who. The fandom menace has ruined a lot of us. But anyway, so the point is unity. That's what this day should all be about.
Mm. And you talked about people with different opinions on different books. Alex is someone who really, really likes the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy. And he also put a video out today. He also put a video out today reflecting on the expanded universe. It was called something about 9 years into dust or something like that. And it's a very good video that you should check out as well. What are your thoughts today, Alex?
I pretty much agree with the sentiment that Lance has stated about hope and and keeping the EU alive. I don't know if I necessarily am joyous of this day, perhaps, but I wasn't like me and Lance. We weren't really a part of it when it happened, when the decanonization happened. I learned about all that after the fact, but it's the loss of knowing that the stories that I got into as I finally did get into the EU in like 2020-ish, 2019, that those stories I got invested in and put my time in, that there was no conclusion to any of those things, which was a big disappointment. So even though I may have not been there for the loss of it, I still feel like I feel the loss of it by not being able to have a conclusion to the things that I've been reading. But I do see it as a way to bring us all together, to celebrate what we have at least. I want to keep fighting for the possibility of a continuation. Maybe that never happens, but I'm going to keep fighting for it till I have good reason to believe it won't happen. And I don't think today is that day. I know there's been a lot of things that have gone on recently with, Star Wars Celebration using, EU titles. I talked about that in my recent video, and that's all, really disheartening. But I still think there is hope to get it continued someday. And as long as we have that, I will continue to stay positive. But regardless, we have 30 years of a story that's really phenomenal, I think, fairly consistent, and it brought us all together. I mean, I know all of you through this fandom. I would have never met any of you without it. So, I mean, and I talked about in my latest video, I mentioned, the private conversation I had with you, Brennan, and Marcel, because I had, listened to people talk about Legends Con, and I kind of was of the opinion I didn't want to go anymore. And it was you two who were like, well, then don't go for the convention. Come to see us. Yeah. Like that's this fandom. Like that wouldn't have happened. Like 9 years ago, I didn't know you. And because of this fandom, you paid for my ticket just so I could go see you in person for a few hours, or for a couple days. Like that's crazy. So, yeah, I don't love this day, but in some sense, I have to thank this day, because if it wasn't for this day, I probably would have never found out about the EU or met any of you.
Yeah. I think those are good thoughts from everybody about this day. I feel frustrated by this day, but like Lance said, it's not a day of mourning because you mourn something that's dead. And the EU is very much alive, arguably more alive than ever. I think, surprisingly, if you think about it, I think there's more spotlight on the EU than there was, because now that it's clearly defined as something else, you have big YouTube channels talking about the old legend stories, and you have these characters from the EU on these big screens in the movies and the shows, with Thrawn showing up in the new canon stuff. And even though those aren't our characters, that led people to the expanded universe, and it will continue to do so. People will want to learn more about them, and the EU is a great place where they can learn about it. So it's frustrating, but now I think we're more unified as a fandom than we were before, like several of you were saying. And even though there is some division, we should use this day as a rallying point to further unify and to be optimistic about a future to where the EU can continue. So, it's a tough day. But again, it's a day where we can celebrate the expanded universe rather than mourn it, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think sorry, Marcel. I think the dynamic changed, over the years. You mentioned EU YouTubers now, where the discussion is reviewing these books. It shifted from maybe a website-driven or podcast-driven review platform to now YouTube, and there was a real base of expanded universe fans back when it was still ongoing. I think sometimes, like, these newer fans, like you guys, sometimes tend to think there wasn't a base. There was. but it was on different platforms back in the day, and it's sort of
No,
shifted over
absolutely.
the years. Yeah. Sorry, Marcel. Go ahead.
No, I was saying to someone earlier after I watched Lance's video, today feels like our Star Wars celebration. You know, I mean, yeah, obviously it's a day to mourn and we reflect on what we lost, but at the same time, I have this renewed sense of community. I have this renewed sense of appreciation for all the people who are so passionate about this thing that I'm so passionate about. You know, I watched Lance's video earlier. I watched Alex's video earlier, and just the passion with which they spoke about the expanded universe and how all lost. You know, it's enough to really just sustain me and reignite that fire that I thought was a little doused by the actual Star Wars celebration earlier this year.
Yeah, and I wanted. Sorry.
Go ahead, Alex.
I was just gonna say, I can't speak for every young fan, but I do, intellectually understand that back in the day, that there were fans all around for sure. I think the idea, though, just with the YouTube in particular, is that back in the day, the internet was kind of still growing into popularity. You had a lot of forums and stuff like that, and that's where a lot of people talked. But, a lot of people my age didn't go on forums, and so YouTube's kind of like this central hub where most information kind of comes from now. Because people, if they want to look something up, like how to cook something, they go to YouTube. They don't look it up on but I just want to say, like that to bring up what Marcel was saying, like, yeah, it kind of does feel like, in a sense, a sort of our Star Wars celebration, because it's, it ended on that. It ended in a sense. We're not getting any continuations at the moment, but at the same time, it's kind of marking, oh, here's the 30 plus years of excellence that we got. I mean, it wasn't all excellent. Bounty Hunter Wars exists. Throw that in there. But it's great that we come together and we talk about this, whether it be on the old forums or here on YouTube today. Everywhere that there is a place to talk about it, we have people talking about it. I think now, today, it's bigger than it's ever been, but it's definitely always been a big thing, which is why it's so sad that it got discontinued.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to how it developed to like a Discord YouTube platform. I mean, back in the day, we had a lot of the same discussions on the forums about things that we discuss now. Was it canon? What thoughts about the Clone Wars? I mean, I feel like I have deja vu sometimes when people bring up some of these topics. So
yeah,
I mean, with new fans coming in, they're going to have these same questions, right? Because they don't know any better, right? But it's even harder to find the information now that a lot of these, the StarWars.com forums are gone now. You don't really have a frame of reference to get a lot of that information. So I mean, all that does make sense. But the negatives of Discord, I see everybody has their own little server, and yes, there is some overlap, but in terms of tactics, in terms of an overarching strategy for continuing the EU, you get all sorts of minute differences.
Definitely,
and it's not a united front. It's even less of a united front than back in 2014, right?
For sure.
Because not only, I think the biggest percentage of like expanded universe fans have just dropped off entirely, and then the remainder has just kind of scattered into their own little corners of YouTube or Discord. I think Matt Wilkins has done a great job kind of drawing some of these people back out, and people like Christopher Nelson. If you have like a topic like collecting, people are interested in that. People want to know what's out there. People want to make sure their collection's complete. So aspects like that bring people back in, but there's pros and cons of how it developed. Sure. And as far as a movement idea, I feel like we're kind of more separated than ever before.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. It's unfortunate. I wish we could be a little bit more organized.
Another problem I think has happened with us is there are a lot of new canon fans who are also EU fans, but they've just kind of forgotten about it. I think they're just so interested in what's hot out there. What's what everybody else focused on. They kind of forgot about the EU, and I don't think a lot of them really. I'm more so talking about the EU fans who were somewhat okay with it, who were, they just love Star Wars, they're just going to continue, which is nothing wrong with that, but and a lot of them have become big names now. Like, for example, I don't know if you guys know who this guy is. His name is Darth Chaco. I've had a lot of encounters with him on Twitter, but he kind of doesn't. I mean, every time I've heard him talk about the EU, it's always been something negative, but he's read all the books. So I don't know. It's just I feel like a lot of EU fans, when that all happened, they just kind of went with the flow, with whatever Disney was doing, and they just forgot, or straight up they don't care anymore.
I wonder if an official continuation was announced, if that would bring those people back in. If Disney-run Lucasfilm started to do new Legends content, I tend to think that the people who are kind of on the fence and more new canon, but do like the EU, but are usually negative about it, if there was a continuation, I think that would bring those people back in, because then there'd be more stories there. There'd be renewed interest there.
Yeah, I think it would depend on to what extent they continued it, right? If they decided to continue it, it would have to be more than something like Marvel 108, right?
Yeah.
A one-shot comic. It would have to be more than the Old Republic MMO, right? Because that has a niche, fan following. But as far as getting an expanded universe, pre-2014 base back to where it was, that's hard to do, especially with a Star Wars television show so prevalent in pop culture nowadays. I don't think we'll exactly ever be back to the expanded universe we've seen before, but if they continued the books, saying, we're getting 3-4 books a year, if they let Dark Horse Comics continue maybe the Legacy run or the Dawn of the Jedi, something like that, I mean, that could be a significant, meaningful continuation that would draw in a fan base, just like you have a fan base for like High Republic or these new canon projects. But I think to some extent we also discount or underestimate the idea that people are just Star Wars fans in general. They don't really give, the average fan doesn't really give a lot of thought as to what's canon or what's expanded universe. When they see Thrawn, I was having discussions with some of the Facebook groups, the book collecting groups, and they post certain things from the Thrawn TV show. And I said, well, what does Zahn say that it's like the original Thrawn, the expanded universe Thrawn, or the new Thrawn that he wrote in his 2 new trilogies, right? And they don't understand that. They think Thrawn is Thrawn, even though we know the expanded universe Thrawn is a separate character than the new canon Thrawn. The average person doesn't see it that way. So I think sometimes we get a little bent out of shape as this, canon versus expanded universe. Yes, we know they're separate, but we have to realize who we're dealing with here sometimes, and not to insult them in any way. I'm just saying.
Yeah, sure.
I wonder. I think the fandom would go nuts if Del Rey announced a Jaina Solo trilogy.
Oh,
I really do. They would go absolutely insane. I think everyone would be hyped for that. I really do. And it would really bring a renewed interest in the EU. I really do. I think Sword of the Jedi, obviously want to know what happens afterwards, but I think that would be just a perfect catalyst for the rest, for a continuation. I think that would be perfect. It'd be great.
I definitely agree. If Del Rey announced a Jaina Solo trilogy to kick off doing 3 or 4 new EU books a year, that would be the perfect way to go about it, because you generate this huge hype, like you were saying, right back towards the EU. And then you could continue on doing stories like in the comments, Max mentioned Mandorla, Ken mentioned Escape from Dagu, the Anzadi Troy Denning trilogy. Like there's tons of cool stuff that we could have seen and could still see eventually, perhaps, if it was continued. And what Scott said about Dark Horse continuing Star Wars comics, I thought it was very interesting that they're returning to Star Wars comics now, albeit only in the new canon. Wouldn't that have been a perfect opportunity to say, all right, Marvel's doing new canon comics, Dark Horse is doing these Legends comics, they all have a Legends banner. That would have been perfect, because then you're separating publishing houses for the different continuities. it would have been a really smart way to do it. But now Dark Horse is doing these Disney canon comics as well. So if they were going to get Dark Horse to go back and do EU comics, then there's already this this confusion that could be around that for the more casual fans.
And not only that, I mean, it would give people like John Ostrander an opportunity to finish his project that he started, right? I don't know. I don't follow the new canon comics from Dark Horse. I don't know if it's the same artists, the same writers, or anything like that. But I mean, it would be a perfect opportunity for one of the greatest, Star Wars comic writers, aside from maybe Tom Veitch, to continue his projects. I think to give him a proper ending, because they were kind of cut short when they lost the license. But just real quick on Sword of the Jedi. I mean, that was a trilogy that people were really sad to see canceled. I mean, that was the mainline continuing story, post Crucible. That and another project people forget is there was supposed to be another Essential Guide to Characters. It's supposed to be 2 volumes, and it was announced at one of the last celebrations before the decanonization. So those were 2 projects that, I mean, we can just write off some of these other books like Tarkin and The New Dawn, but Sword of the Jedi, I mean, that was a real loss.
I'd also like to say that, sorry, Alex.
No, you're good.
I'd also like to say that I think one of the fringe benefits of even just a book-based or comic-based continuation of the expanded universe is that newer fans and Disney canon fans, maybe they jumped into the Disney Star Wars stuff because of the shows and the prevalence of the shows, but they seem to be under this misconception that the expanded universe is some incoherent mess or it's fan fiction or something like that, because they've never really lived through an era, a lot of them, where Lucasfilm is backing these stories and publishing these stories. And I think if they saw that Lucasfilm was putting out these stories in this alternate timeline, it might spark some of their curiosity to check out some of the older expanded universe stuff that they're probably, very reluctant to try in the first place, because they think, oh, it's not canon, it's not official, it doesn't matter, it's from this incoherent, weird timeline. Like there's all these myths that I just see propagated on Twitter that are just not true about the expanded universe. And I think that if we saw just some more support from Lucasfilm in regards to these older stories, beyond the reprints, I think it would really get an entire segment of the fan base to go back and look at some of these older stuff. And that's more Star Wars for everybody, because if they like the new stuff, that's great. But then now they have, a reason to check out the old stuff. And it might finally convince people to just dispel this concept of canonicity. Like, it doesn't matter. Continuity matters, right? I want a coherent timeline. If there's 2 separate timelines, fine. But canonicity is just, it's such like a weird concept in fiction, right? Canonicity it's a religious term, but in fiction, it's such a weird concept. So I always try and bring the conversation back to continuity. That's what matters to me.
Yeah, and they've said on Twitter, I mean, some of the higher ups at Lucasfilm, it wasn't Matt Martin that said continuity doesn't matter, right? It's just the stories. And I think to some extent that is true for the casual fan. But you mentioned the expanded universe, how it's thought of being an incoherent mess. I mean, guys like Pablo, guys like Leland Shee, they don't stick up for us, right? They know it was all connected. They had an official holocron database. That never gets mentioned. And I think a lot of these people who maybe have come into being a fan of Star Wars, post decanonization, they look back on the EU and they just say that it was an incoherent mess, just as an excuse not to get into it. They say, oh yeah, it was an incoherent mess, I don't want to spend my time reading it. And I think if they just give it a chance, they'd like it.
Yeah,
I agree.
I was also going to add, I think one of the more harmful things that people say when talking about the EU possibly getting continuation is saying that if it gets continued, it's going to be this garbage or whatever, which I think is a very dangerous line. Or like it was already garbage, becoming garbage or whatever, so it shouldn't be continued. Let it die. Let it end on a whimper or a high note, whatever people's differing opinions may be. But I see that as a very destructive way of going about the move. And again, this comes back to the whole movement being in different groups and not actually having a coherent front, because you have people that like me that would love to see a continuation. Of course I would hope it'd be in continuity and everything. That's really my only basis. I I really don't care who's writing it, so long as it feels like, the Alex announces his love for naked cheek. Sorry, I was reading Matt's thing, but I really don't care who's writing it. It could be somebody new, somebody from the new canon, even, just so long as it remains in continuity with the old expanded universe. I don't care who's writing it. I just want it to feel like the books that I've been reading and feel like it fits with that canon. But you got people that don't want it to continue, and I think that's a very harmful thing. I think even if you don't like the stories that were coming out near the end of the buyout, I think you can still fight for the rights of it to continue without necessarily wanting to read it yourself if you have that sort of opinion. But I think it's very harmful to the movement as a whole of the expanded universe, especially if you're trying to get it to continue and you have all these loud voices talking around, and Lucasfilm may be hearing some of it being like, well, people weren't enjoying it anyway, so why are we going to bring it back? And that's some of the stuff that worries me for ever getting a continuation, is because you have those dissonant voices talking that way about the EU.
Yeah, well, something that's interesting about that, like you're saying, Alex, is, and this is a point Christopher Nelson brought up earlier, is he said that a lot of EU fans treat the EU like it's encased in amber now. It's like this perfect, well, maybe not perfect to everyone, but it's this cohesive narrative that happened. It's great that it happened. It's unfortunate it's no longer happening, but at least it is preserved.
Yeah.
And that's a take I see a lot of people have. A take I don't necessarily agree with at all. There's so much room, like Christopher Nelson talked about in his video earlier today, for continuation. There's all these stories that were left not completed, like Dawn of the Jedi, Force Unleashed, Crucible to Legacy, all of these stories that we have that could have been told. And it's just unfortunate. But then these people are also saying, what if it's ruined when it comes back, right? And I don't think that could be the case. If you're bringing back the original authors first to finish off what they originally intended, I don't see how that could go too wrong. And if you don't like it, don't consider any of the new EU continuation part of your story. Like it's very simple. There's a lot of us that would like the expanded universe to continue, and then there's some of us who don't want it to continue. It would be great if it continued, because I think that there would be more scope for goodness if the expanded universe returned for everyone overall. I just think that it could bring in those people on the fence, and it could bring us a story to continue what wasn't completed. But then those same people are saying that, what if they get new canon authors to write in it? And that's a problem that some people have. Like, what if you get some of these High Republic writers to write in it? And, I don't have a problem with it if they're staying in continuity with the expanded universe. If you're writing a good story set in the expanded universe, set in continuity, I think first you'd have to have another holocron set up.
Yeah,
you'd have to have someone like Leland Chi setting up a holocron, making sure everything's cohesive, and then bringing what the original author's intentions were and finishing those first and making sure they get that down, and then bringing in new people in. I don't know. I see Scott is got a lot of thoughts here on this.
Oh, yes. Tons of thoughts. First of all, does the holocron still exist? Where is it? What state is it in? Was it updated for things like Marvel 108? Like how? There's tons of questions about that. And a lot can be said at the same time for the argument that Lucasfilm, expanded universe fans saying Lucasfilm shouldn't continue the expanded universe. Okay. First of all, that was an argument that was never floated during 2014, right? Nobody was saying that. That's an argument that kind of got picked up because people were disenfranchised with the new canon material, right? Second of all, the expanded universe has always been a licensed material, right? Dark Horse, Del Rey has come up with the stories, and they were proved, and the continuity was kind of held in this holocron database. That's how it worked. So the idea that, Disney writers or new canon writers, I mean, I guess to some extent, people like Christy Golden could finish off, Sword of the Jedi. She's a new canon author, right? At the same time, I mean, you have authors like Zahn who have kind of stuck with their continuity and tried to shoehorn it into the new canon to some extent. So there's a lot of problems with that, and it would depend a lot on to what extent the expanded universe was continued. Are we talking about a major project, a 19-book series, or are we going to get the trickle effect? 1 book per year, 2 books, 3 books. That would depend greatly on what they had in mind to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how feasible or realistic this is, but I would love to see even just a publisher, like someone like Del Rey, approach Lucasfilm and be like, hey, we'd love to put out more Star Wars content. Like, have you guys ever considered, returning to the Legends content? I don't know if that ever happens or if that's if it's probably already been done. I don't have those, backdoor connections that I would know whether or not that conversation's ever been had. I would imagine it probably was had at some point over the last 9 years, but I just don't. I think about it this way. It's like, at the end of the day, it makes so much sense for Lucasfilm to do this, even just from a profit standpoint. Like they can make so much more money.
Yeah,
I think if they were to put out more Star Wars for more people. And Alex, you said in your video earlier, it would not cost that much to put out a book.
Not as much as it does with all the TV shows and stuff that they're making. And I already brought up in a couple videos now, I brought up the fact that they made an entire anime called Star Wars Visions, which was not canon or to Legends. It was his own thing, along with this Ronin novel that was connected to the anime. And that was something they just decided to make for the hell of it, because they wanted some anime in Star Wars. But if they can do that, which putting the budget in to make all these animated features within that season, and they're making a second season now, we saw from the most recent Star Wars Celebration, they're going to put all that money and time and effort into something that's not even a part of their own continuity, then it can't be that much of a stretch to simply make a couple books a year, like just novels. Like I'm trying to be like as realistic as possible, like, because I know that comics are a bit more expensive. Just novels, like 2 to 3 of them a year, and you're going to get investment because that there's Legends fans out there. It makes literally no sense to me logically, outside of spite, why they don't make more.
And that could very well be. Some people say that they don't want people discovering the EU because it's a better story. And, while I think that to be the case, I won't comment further on that. But what you said about Visions is very interesting, because a lot of people who don't want EU continuation say, well, the casual fans would get confused.
I don't think the casual fans would even know, to be honest with you. A lot of them would. Some of them would, some of them wouldn't. I mean, there's a spectrum of people's knowledge, right? What could be said? There's so many things brought up. I think, well, I'll let somebody else go. I'll gather my thoughts here.
Well, one thing I was going to say about Visions is they put that out, Lucasfilm did, and they expected the fans to know this isn't a part of our narrative. If they can do that, what's stopping them from doing new Legends material?
And I will also say that Legends has a logo. It literally has, I feel how you will about it, but it literally has Legends emblazoned atop, Marvel 108 and the reprints and all that stuff.
Big, obvious golden banner. Yeah.
The color of Waru. that's an identifiable signifier of something that's different from their mainline novels and comics.
It's the same thing I mentioned also, I think, in my latest video. Marvel has had thousands upon thousands of different timelines and stories going on.
Star Trek. Star Trek as well, which is a competitor to Star Wars. Sorry to interrupt. They have this Kelvin timeline. They have this Prime universe, and they expect the fans to know that they are separate.
Mm-hmm. But I was going to mention, like, with the Marvel stuff, you have thousands of different portrayals of the same character, and nobody bats an eye. Like, they all understand these are all different interpretations. And it's way more confusing with those comics, because you got, like, the original Spider-Man, which went from, like, the 1960s to now. Like, it's still going or something. Or it ended, and it continued with Superior Spider-Man. And then you got Marvel Ultimate, which is a whole separate, more edgy timeline or something like that. Like, they can do all that. And the DC has, like, the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is literally a story about a bunch of different stories coming together for this big event. But you can't have 2 separate timelines for Star Wars. which is not that hard to understand. And as Marcel added, has a big Legends banner on it. So that way, any property that comes out post 2014, you would know, oh, hey, this isn't a part of Disney canon. It's got Legends on the banner.
Yeah. I just like to go back to something Marcel said earlier about advocates on the inside, publishers, maybe people at Lucasfilm. I think to some extent, when we do streams like this, there are people out there that listen. I know people at Del Rey have watched Matt's videos in the past. So we do have advocates, I think, to some extent. And that's why we have to watch what we say, I think, a lot of the times, because sometimes, we could put people off in terms of our rhetoric or in terms of how easy it is to publish something like Escape from Dagu. We don't know all the inside details about the status of that, any royalties that may arise from that. You would think on its face, they could just publish it and it's free money, right? We don't know. So there are a lot of unknowns. I just like to say that there are people like at Marvel, the can't think of his name, but the author that did 108. He was an expanded universe fan. A lot of these people do read the material. That's how they get involved in that career. Yeah. So you'd be surprised how knowledgeable some of these people are. People from Fantasy Flight, they read all the West End Games material, all the Wizards of the Coast RPGs. So they're fans just like us. So
I think that a lot of the people writing new canon, even if they haven't read the expanded universe, the people writing the new canon, they've at least read Wikipedia or watched a YouTube video about the EU, because something that someone brought up, I don't follow Disney canon. I try to ignore it, try to ignore the news with it as well. But someone told me that the Star Weird from Wizards of the Coast is going to be in the new Dr. Aphra comic. That's a super obscure, deep cut lore reference to the expanded universe. The Star Weird is barely in the EU. Yeah, it's like one source book. I think it's the Adversaries, what Wizards of the Coast source book, Ultimate Adversaries, I think is where it comes from. But that's a super deep cut lore reference, and they're taking that, putting it in Disney canon. So even if they haven't read the EU, they've watched some YouTuber talk about the EU, these people writing the new canon, or they're reading Wikipedia pages about it. So even though not in our continuity, they're aware of it. And I think that there are some expanded universe fans working at Marvel and Del Rey who would love nothing more than to get to work in the sandbox that was the expanded universe.
Sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
I absolutely agree. I think there's many people that are writing Disney stuff now that are fans of the expanded universe. I don't think it's necessarily any writers or anything that are currently within, the new Canada are the problem. I think it's the higher ups that aren't making any of the stories or anything that just, for some reason, or just don't want it. I don't think it has anything to do with the writers themselves. I think there's plenty of them that'd be more than happy to.
The reason why I'm just not convinced about this notion that people are going to be confused by the two timelines. Alex, you brought up the whole superhero Marvel, DC had like a billion timelines each. There was a movie that was put out recently called Spider-Man. I think it's like No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, where we had three separate Spider-Men from three separate timelines in the exact same movie together. And that movie made like $1 bajillion, and everybody understood what was going on and understood.
Yeah, I think it's the 5th highest grossing film of all time.
I think that the public is these days with the Marvel multiverse and all that, and I'm not suggesting that Star Wars should be a multiverse and then you see like Luke from UCAN and join up like Jaina from the EU. I'm not no, but what I'm saying is that people understand the concept of multiple timelines within fiction. There has been no better time than the present to reintroduce a separate timeline, because the consumer is aware. You have the banner, you have the consumer awareness. There's just no reason not to reintroduce the expanded universe.
Before Scott goes, because I think Scott had something to say as well. Lance, are you still with us? Are you asleep?
I'm just quiet.
Are you in Force Ghost state?
I'm always in Force Ghost state.
You were flickering in and out there on your green screen.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't even have a green screen, so that's probably why I was flickering.
What's your profile picture of? I can't tell.
Oh, it's Zahn, Stackpole, and Kevin J. Anderson in Hawaiian shirts.
Very nice. Very nice.
And the chair in the middle is for Aaron Alston.
Oh, was it?
Rest in
Yeah.
peace.
Oh,
Right.
man.
Very sad.
Oh, man.
Oh, that picture is now so much more sadder. I just thought it was a funny picture they did.
No,
Yeah.
they're because Aaron Alston was famous for wearing Hawaiian shirts, and that's like
Yeah.
a tribute to him.
Yeah.
Dang, now I feel bad for having this my profile picture.
You know,
No,
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 I mean
it's
they
better
were
now.
celebrating Aaron Alston there, so
Yeah,
that's a
for sure.
fine picture. That's why they took the picture, actually. But yeah, just going back to Marcel's point about how people wouldn't be confused, I think in no way, like if Force Unleashed 3 came out, everybody would know what continuity it came out in, right?
Yeah.
There would be no question. There would be no people confused about that. I mean, some people might say, "Oh, is Starkiller, in the new canon?" Well, I guess he could be. It doesn't really matter, right? The only content I care about is the expanded universe. They could do whatever they want with that. But I think so. There's an urge to compare the old stuff to the new, and really, the new canon as it exists, it's primarily a TV and film franchise. It's totally different than what we had before, where we were told by George Lucas there would be no more movies. So the way to continue it was through the RPGs, was through the comics and books. So that's what I'm used to. That's what I'm a fan of. And I think to some extent, even you could argue, even though I don't follow it, in the new canon, the book readers, the comic readers, they're kind of shortchanged because they don't really know. They were told everything is going to be under canon, right? The comics are going to equal the films, the same status. You don't have the tier system like we had in the expanded universe. But the projects, I mean, you have the High Republic, but the novels per year, it seems like it's winded down. You have that Clone Wars novel that came out. You had the Luke and Lando book. And I don't follow all of it, so I might be missing something. But I think they've been shortchanged, right? If you're just a follower of books, of comics, and you don't care about the TV shows, you don't have a lot of material, even if you agree to follow the new canon. So I think they've been shortchanged, and I think that's a point that people don't really discuss.
What you
And
said?
to bounce off that, Scott. Sorry, man.
No, go ahead.
To bounce off that, I think that's one of the biggest setbacks of the new canon. They're so cinematic focused that the books and the comics, they're like, what's the point in reading them? Because most of them are just spin-offs of the books of the TV shows and movies that they're putting out. They're not really, they're just tie-ins. They're not really their own thing. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy the High Republic so much, because it is separate. It is its own entity within the franchise. And it's, instead of books and comics tying into a TV show, now they're going to have TV shows tying into the books and comics with the Acolyte coming up. So I think that's why I'm so attracted to the High Republic. Is it's very EU-esque in the way the stories are being told in that. And I know you guys may not read it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's why I personally enjoy it, is because haven't gotten very far in it, but from what I've read, I've liked it because it is its own thing. It's separate from everything else. There's no EU characters in it because it's an era the EU never explored. So, but that's one of the biggest problems with the new canon. Their books and comics, for the most part, are not necessary.
Yeah.
But in contrast with the EU, man, you're having aliens from another galaxy invading. You're having, stories set a century after Return of the Jedi. You're having stories set thousands of years before the movies. A lot of them with just exclusively new characters, like the Old Republic, for example. Then, of course, Dawn of the Jedi, which is 20,000 years before that.
Legacy, Luke's
More like
great grandson.
35,000. Yeah. So that's why the EU was another reason why I love the EU, is because you kind of have to read the EU if you want to get more into Star Wars, and if you want the whole story, you kind of have to read the EU, and because it explores stuff that has nothing to do with the movies. And that's what people wanted from it. That's why I think that's why the new canon, people just don't really like the books and comics so much because they don't really matter in the end. And Marcel, I think Marcel, you could agree with that, right? You've read a lot of them. They don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, do they?
What I like about the expanded universe is that I don't feel like they were tethered by waiting to put all the best stuff in TV shows, because that simply wasn't an option at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that the new material plays it safe, and it has like very stories that I would argue the characters are in the same place at the end of the book that they are in the beginning of the book, and we don't really learn much about the universe around us other than like Easter eggs and nuggets and stuff like that. And I think about something like Legacy, like the Legacy comics, and there's that one issue where they go back in time. I think it's in like the Claws of the Dragon arc, and they talk about oh God, what's his name? Darth Crate's past, where he's been since the Republic comics. And that blew my mind. We learned so much in like 32 pages.
Yeah.
So much lore was dumped into 32 pages.
So good. Yeah.
And I've just never seen something that significant or groundbreaking from the new stuff. I just haven't. That like materially affects the universe around it and kind of changes the game.
It sounds similar to an issue I had with the Rebellion era of the EU, because there are some good stories in there, but a lot of it you can't do much because all of the big changes that are going to happen to Han, Luke, and Leia have to happen in Episode 5. So you can't have big developmental changes for those characters because they have to be you can have them develop a little bit because obviously by Episode 5 they're in a different place than they were in Episode 4. Luke's a bit of a better soldier at this point because he's been doing it for a couple of years, and they obviously have a better friendship, so you can build upon the friendship. But as a whole, the characters remain the same. That was one of my biggest issues with the Rebellion era, because you can't do anything with them because you have to wait till Episode 5. And it seems, I haven't read it, but that sounds like what seems to be happening with the books of the new canon, because all of the big events that you're going to see are going to happen in TV shows and the movies. So by virtue of that, you cannot have any big character development unless you make an original character, that's apart from that. But then again, it's a bit harder to make people care about brand new characters unless you have a really good writer writing that story, which is really sad for people who enjoy that stuff or enjoy the new canon.
Yeah. And I want to echo what Lance said earlier and what Scott and Alex have been saying. You were sort of saying that with the EU, they weren't tethered to, the television series where they kind of feel relegated to where they can't tell the most important stories. New Jedi Order, I would argue it's maybe the most important Star Wars story of all. You have this threat that is threatening not just worlds, but like the entire galaxy. And I guess to an extent, of course, the films are that as well. But you have this overarching 19-book series. All of the main characters are important. All of the legacy characters change and develop so much over the course of the 19-book series. And it's so very important and impactful. And I could be wrong, but with the Disney canon stuff, a lot of the books can't do something on the scale of New Jedi Order because they have to worry about the new canon shows. And that has to be where the important stuff happens. So the books are left telling the scraps of the stories that don't have the narrative impact that the EU had.
Yeah, and that kind of goes opposite of creative freedom, right? Playing it safe doesn't allow creative freedom, at least for the books and comics. Now, the opposite could be said about the television shows. And you could argue the expanded universe was kind of tethered to the Clone Wars during its final years. We could argue that was probably a bad thing. But, I mean, just trying to change the topic over to, like, the expanded universe and how it changed and what tactics work. I mean, there hasn't really been, like, since 2014, since the decanonization, there hasn't been a lot of discussions on what we want as far as a united fan base, because we have some people that say, oh, Disney's just going to ruin it. We have some people that say, well, you should just continue the loose ends of the story and then finish it off, or you have some people who are more along the lines, including myself, that just want maybe one book a year, 2 books a year, some meaningful continuation other than just one comic, Marvel 108. So
Yeah.
what are your guys' thoughts on, as far as like everybody's differing opinions on how to continue it, or if it should be continued?
Well, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, what's up, everybody?
What are your thoughts, Jay? Answer the question. I'm just kidding. No, seriously. What are your thoughts on what Scott just asked?
Okay, my thoughts is like, yes, I think they should continue the EU, and like, I don't think EU fans are asking for that much. Like, comics, like, okay, if they release like 1 or 2 ongoing comic series, like 1 or 2 novels, I think that would be pretty good. Like every year and a half, I don't know, but like just do some marketing for the book, do like a marketing campaign for some of the books like they used to, like how they did for NJO. I think that would be cool. They don't have to make any games. Having like sequels to Force Unleashed or whatever. That would be cool, but just do the bare minimum of printing books because they sell really good.
Why did Brennan leave?
He wanted to let you in.
Oh, you didn't
Oh,
have
that's
to do that.
very nice.
What a
That's your,
sweetheart.
this is your stream. Why would you do?
So I'm the new acting host since I'm in Brennan's position. So Maxine, welcome. What are your thoughts about this day and just about the expanded universe, how it should be continued, just the development over the years? What do you think?
Well, I just want to say where I was like at the time when it happened, because I remember I was old enough to remember. So I had kind of dipped my toes into the EU back then because I was like I don't know what year was that. I was 14. I was 13 or 14. So I was just kind of beginning to learn about it, and my mom told me that Disney bought Star Wars and they're gonna make new movies, and then after the decanonization happened, I was like, oh well, I guess I don't need to learn about this anymore. But at first I was like, oh well, maybe they'll like adapt those characters into the movies, and then they didn't. And then I kind of fell out of it for a while, and I read some books here and there. And then Lance, I've been an EU fan for a long time, just not like how I am. Okay, cannot
He wants
take
to take
more
credit. Let
responsibility.
him have the credit. Let him have the credit.
All right, yeah, I'll give him that because Young Giants kind of,
Everything.
launched everything else.
I'll
It's
reserve
where
my
it is now.
joke. I'll reserve my joke to Lance
But
for now.
like I think it would be so easy for them to just continue it as as we said earlier on the stream, like Marvel and DC, they do their comics and they do their movies and nobody gets confused. Everybody knows it's like 2 separate things, so why can't we just do that with Star Wars? Like, and Marvel is like infinitely more confusing. Same with DC. Like, there's so many different variants of different characters. So, and I would just kill for Sword of the Jedi. It makes me upset to think about it.
Yeah.
We're hearing some robot noises from Alex. I think that's Alex.
Is that me?
Alex, your motivator is overheating.
I'm gonna. Can I throw in my 2 cents, Scott, towards your question?
Yep.
I would love to see the expanding universe return in any way, shape, or form. I will take another Marvel 108. I would love to see novels and comics. I think they could do animated films on some of the expanding universe storylines. But I'm not greedy. I would anything really. I would be happy with. I think that, like Alex said earlier, realistically speaking, novels might be the easiest route, especially in the short term, to see if it's going to be profitable. But I'm not one of those people that wants it to stay dead. I vehemently oppose that notion. I'm not one of those people who's afraid of it coming back under current leadership. I think that under current Lucasfilm leadership, we've still seen some really good stuff produced before decanonization, and there's no reason to think that it's going to be bad.
Yeah, I agree with that in a lot of respects. Although I will say, I never want to see, after Clone Wars, I never want to see another animated movie.
Oh, fair enough.
But I know where you're going
Well, if
with
that's
that.
the bar, then
You
of
don't-
course.
You don't like Stinky?
Oh no, Rod is a
You get another Ahsoka after that. So
Yeah, no, fair.
so Brennan has a question, I guess, for all of us. He was going to ask what we think of, or what did we think in general of the Legends films or shows? I guess the ones that existed. So I thought the Tartakovsky's micro series, I thought that was the best one by far.
I think what he's asking is if they were to make new ones.
Oh, new ones?
I think
Ewok
so.
season 3 for sure.
I don't like adapting novels or comics, existing stories into films. I think that could only lead to problems as far as continuity. I could see it if they took a different angle with it. Like, for example, like what they did with the X-Wing series, right? How they tied it into the end of the Thrawn trilogy. I think you could show maybe Rogue Squadron during New Jedi Order, right? Some stories that, or maybe Wraith Squadron, right? Some stories that weren't told from different angles of different battles. I think that could be done well if you pay attention to continuity, of course.
I think that when it comes to adaptations, live action adaptations, I don't think that's the best medium for it. If you're gonna do an adaptation for something, you want to do animation. That's the best way, and you want to make a spin on it, and you can have more creativity and just more.
I feel like you have more freedom with animation.
Exactly, because like it's so much limitations. I would love to see Dave Filoni do an anime. I'm just
No. No.
I was gonna lead you guys on. Like, I would love to see you.
Who wants to see Ewok season 3?
Me.
I haven't seen any of the seasons, but I would support it. I would support it.
I'll be honest about that one. I'm not a big fan of Ewoks, the show. I gotta be honest. But if a season 3 got made, I would watch it. But I'll be honest, I was more a fan of the Droids TV show. I thought that was.
Yeah, I mean, we did get Shadows of Endor at the very end of the EU. Dark Horse came out with that digest-sized comic out of nowhere. That was just the continuity of the Ewok series. But
I like the movies more. Wait.
I don't know if I want an Ewok season 3 because it won't have the 80s feel that the original show did. So
what I was going to say before I was taken out, I was kidding. But I was going to mention back to the previous question before the TV show one. Personally, I would love to see the EU go on indefinitely. As a separate timeline. In different eras, fleshing out Dawn of the Jedi era. Maybe making novelizations for the Old Republic era because a lot of people don't have time to play video games. So having an official novelization for a lot of those stories could be nice for a lot of people. But my main concern would be just filling out that gap after Crucible all the way up until the Legacy comics, maybe even getting Legacy 3 as like a definitive ending to the story. But I mainly just want the biggest gaps filled so I can feel like I have a story that ended, because Legacy is great, but it's not an ending for the novel characters. It's its own separate story, mainly, minus the connections to the Republic comics. So that's my main area that I would want concluded. If I only got a couple stories that filled out that gap, I would be content with an ending, though I would love for it to go on indefinitely. As to the TV shows, I don't know. If they're going to do something, I guess like Scott said, a New Jedi Order type show, maybe by Tartakovsky again, because you can get really crazy with the action, and follow different characters, follow Kyle Katarn or something. Other characters that didn't get fleshed out in the novels and get to see other sides of the war. But again, that's something I would love to see, but I just don't really see that ever happening if we did get a TV show set in the Legends continuity.
Yeah, well, I agree that it only makes sense to finish off the projects that weren't completed as of 2014. I think those should be the projects that get worked on first. I'm thinking Dawn of the Jedi. I'm thinking Legacy Volume 3. What were some of the other ones that got cut short? Dark Times, I think, maybe. Invasion never got a proper ending. Force Unleashed, yeah. Force Unleashed 3 definitely needs to be the main one.
So, after recently having read like Fate of the Jedi and stuff, and knowing what I know about like Alana Solo, I would absolutely love to see like her become the Jedi Queen that they see in the visions. And I would love to see like Ben grow up and her grow up and like see what kind of conflicts they have to face and like see how we get to Cade Skywalker and Cole Skywalker and Anya Solo, because like especially Anya, because she's descendant of Tenel Ka and Jason, so like what happened, she's supposed to be royalty, with the Hapens and everything, so like why is she just a lowly junk trader?
Yeah.
And my biggest issue too with that, sorry to interrupt you, Jay, is that the Crucible, which is the final novel we have chronologically,
It's not an ending.
It's not an ending because the Lost Tribe are still a problem. Abeloth is still around. That's a big thing. That's
That's another thing.
unresolved.
Abeloth needs like what happens to Abeloth, because like the way it's like written in the book, like there's definitely like a little like hint that Abeloth could definitely come back. So like how does that happen?
Yeah,
like
Abeloth-
what does that look like? What does she finally die when she comes back again? And like who kills her? So
She learns the power of love and friendship, and she doesn't be bad anymore.
she just wants to be told she's pretty.
Let me ask you. Let me ask everybody here then. If you could like wish list like one thing, one storyline that you could get finished, that was cut off, and you could only choose one, what would it be for everybody?
Jaina and Jagged's marriage and children, and then there's their children's story. They had at least one child. We know that because of Roinfell.
Sword of the Jedi.
So pretty much Sword of the Jedi for both of you.
Sword of the Jedi, right?
Yeah.
I'll give an unpopular answer and say I want to know what happened to Ken. I want a continuation of the Jedi Prince series.
Ken's in the chat. You can just ask
Kent Hamner.
Ray, shut up with
Whatever his
Kent
name
Hamner.
is.
He's a piece of shit. I hate Kent Hamner so much.
What about you, Alex?
I would like to. Oh, my bad.
Oh, sorry, Jay. I'll get to you next.
Yeah.
What about you, Alex?
I think the Lost Tribe sucks as a villain. I think they were never really a threat. They're kind of lame. So the main thing I would want to see concluded is everything with Abeloth. I would also like to see, personally, I would like to see Ben redeem the Star Kai and get married, and show a little montage leading up to Cade through that, because I personally want a redemption story for the Star Kai. So that's just me.
I miss Vistara.
I'm gonna comment on Sloth here. A story where Vader kills Ahsoka would actually be amazing.
What is it Matt Wilkins says, that she trips on a Huji but dies?
Yeah,
that's my headcanon.
Jay, what about you?
Well, I really liked Darth Bane, Path of Destruction. I would like Drew Carpenter to write more.
Darth Santa novel being amazing.
It's so good. Like it has no business being that good.
I know.
It really doesn't.
So
like
good.
Bro really went off on that. I'm like, damn.
He did.
I'm just reading the comments, and is Kenneth Hamner really supposed to be Ken? Is that a thing? Do their ages really match up like that? Because I thought I looked at that before, and their ages were way off.
It's a theory. I don't know if it works, but that's something that people
Hamner's a douche.
It's just because they both have Ken in their name. That's literally
I'd rather have them do a young adult series set after Crucible, where Ken comes back. We learn what he did during New Jedi Order and the events of Legacy of the Force and all that, and Fate of the Jedi. And he's actually been around the whole time just doing other stuff, fighting like weird cosmic other threats. And he comes and trains Alana Solo because why not? Just
and he just beats Abeloth in the end.
Scott, the other reason why it's the prevalent theory, there's two other reasons. It's because, I think Ken Palpatine would have every motivation to change his last name. I mean, you know, in the new canon, the surviving Palpatine changed her last name too. So, and then the other reason why is because Kemph Hamner, I think he first appears in the NJO. He kind of like steps out of nowhere, and he's described as this like good friend of Leia and Luke and Han.
That's true.
And he's just like out of nowhere, and he has this. He's a Jedi Master. He has this prominent.
But they also say he's like a military guy as
he's
well.
a military guy too. So you know you
Ken could have gone to the military.
I always thought he was older than Luke. He was at least Luke's age or olher than Luke, but I may be misremembering.
That's also explainable. I don't ascribe to this theory anymore. I used to, but that's also explainable as well because Triclops ages quicker. He has like
right.
Oh god.
20. Because he's a clone, or no, he's not a clone. He's a hybrid mutant.
Yeah, but he has like white hair and like a shock of white hair and stuff like that. So that's also kind
of. You gotta love Jedi Prince, man.
So I don't know. I haven't read Jedi Prince yet. I don't know how Ken is as a character, amazing. But Kemph Hamner's kind of a douche. So like,
well, Ken is like a teenager kid in that series, so a lot he could become one. I mean, Jason did.
That's true.
So
I was so happy when his ass died in Fate of the Jedi. I was like, finally. Jesus.
But is there a character in the EU who got worse as they went along? Like they just got like more annoying. I'm trying to think.
Ahsoka?
The obvious? I don't know. I thought the Tahiri kind of got annoying.
No, you take that back.
That's the one.
No.
Take that back. Right now.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, Darth
Vader. I think that Ahsoka got worse as she went on.
Ahsoka got better.
No, I think Ahsoka got better. Earlier, she was way more annoying.
I'd say one who got better as they went on would be Raynar.
Mm-hmm.
Raynar the Wolf.
I agree.
Raynar is based as hell. Like.
Okay, so I've gotten us way off topic.
Yeah.
Need to bring Brennan back so he can direct this conversation. But he agrees with Raynar. Raynar was great in the end.
Loved him in Fate of the Jedi.
Hey, Scott, I have a question for you, and then I want to hop off.
Sure.
Let somebody else come in. So there was a short story in Star Wars Tales. I think it was Tales 19. It's the one where it takes place like hundreds of years in the future, and 3PO's in it.
The storytelling. The good one.
Was that C canon or in canon?
I think it was after I forget what issue it ended, but like after issue 20 or some of the last few issues, they say they were all expanded universe because people were upset about the fact that Tales was like hit or miss. Like some stories were canon, some were not. So I forget what issue they became all canon. I guess if it's not too silly, you can consider it true expanded universe. So
I mean, it contradicts nothing. So like,
yeah,
why not?
If it contradicts nothing, then I guess you can consider it expanded universe. But I forget what issue they in fact said, okay, this is definitive. All these stories count after this issue. It may have been 20, it may have been 19. I don't know.
I believe it's issue because there's 24 issues. I believe it's issue 21 to 24 that are exclusively all within the continuity. And then before then, like you said, Scott, it's kind of like a case-by-case basis. What I will say is it doesn't make it canon to the EU, but the storyteller is featured in Noah's chronology. So
that's why, because someone told me about that, and I read that story recently, and I thought it was amazing. And to be honest, I think that's a great end to the EU. I think if they didn't go after that, I would have been cool with that. If that little story was the final.
Falcon, though. Oh God. Hold on.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
But yeah, I'm kind of against the idea of putting a definitive end of the EU and saying, okay, this is the last story, because we thought Tales of the Jedi was the earliest in the timeline, and then we get Dawn of the Jedi, we get some of these other stories. So I think that's kind of problematic. You could get really exaggerated and say, this is 100,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, and this comes before this, and they still have the starships and technology. So I would err against that. But if it doesn't contradict anything, I think this was that the one that's just C-3PO and there's not a lot else?
Yeah, it's these aliens that are on this world, and they're like getting enslaved, and they come across 3PO like he's all broken, and 3PO tells them the story of Star Wars.
Okay.
And he eventually gets blasted and destroyed, but he has a lightsaber on him, which I don't know. I guess
Could be
whoever left
Luke's.
there forgot their lightsaber too.
It's green, so it could be Luke's.
It may be.
I mean, it doesn't look like
then
it, but it could be.
one of the aliens picks up the lightsaber and says, "There's always hope," or something really neat. I thought it was a really good story. It was real nice. And to make it even kind of cooler, it is in the Legacy Volume 2 Epic Collection. It's the very final story in that. So it kind of like, you put it at the end of, like on my shelf, that's going to be the last thing. I'm not going to put anything else after that because there's nothing else after that. But it's kind of cool they included that in that trade. So it's pretty neat. It was good. It was a good story. I consider it C canon personally. I think it was great.
As of now, it's the farthest story in the timeline. We could say that.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's in the Epic Collection, I don't know. They put things like the Brian Wood series in the Epic Collection, so I don't know if you could take that alone as evidence, but it's probably one of those stories that was written that you could take it if you want to believe that that's the true end, or leave it if you think it's too silly. I think that's how Tales generally was with the first several issues.
At the very least, I would say secondary canon. You could say that.
Oh, you know how I think of S canon. S canon's BS, but
still part of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna hop off. Let some other people come on. You have a good night. Thank you for having me, Brandon.
See you, Lance.
Bye,
Lance.
I
was going to say, I don't say this enough, but now that he's gone, I can talk about it. Lance is the reason why I'm in this community. I met Scott through Lance. I met Max through Lance. I met Alex through Lance. I met Jay through Lance. I met Brennan through Lance. I met Chris through Lance. I met Matt through Lance. So
Lance brings people together.
Shout out to my boy Lance. You know what's funny? When I first texted Marcel, I thought Marcel was like this old guy. like
I thought Marcel was really young, like our age.
Nah.
I thought so too, because he joined a live stream of mine, and I couldn't tell his age because he didn't have his camera on. It was just an avatar. So I thought he was like late 20s, maybe.
Hold on, I'll be right back.
I just thought he was like this bald, like older guy. I don't know. That might.
Well, I mean, give it a few years.
Me and Marcel are the same age, so I'll be bald very soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, you have a luscious shock of hair, Scott. I don't think you have to worry about that.
And I cut off my hair every month, so
yeah.
Oof.
So I am back for now, but one of my friends, Fine Editions, his name's Brady, was looking to get on. So I will be off again if he returns.
I'll hop off, Brennan.
He's not here yet, so.
Okay, when he comes, let me know.
But one question that I wanted to ask is if you could have one expanded universe story that hasn't been written. I think this was kind of asked earlier, but I'll ask it again. What would that be?
Well, I'd like a conclusion to the Jedi Prince series. I don't know if it would be one story or more of a series, but that would be my answer because that's my favorite. That's my favorite series. If you
just
call it
pay Noah. He already made it. It was incredible.
It would have been Shadows of Kenobi, right? And then an 8 and a 9.
Well, I wonder. I wish Noah could talk to the Davids and get their input just to make sure everything is cohesive and the story is where they want it, because they had ideas for 7, 8, and 9. They never got to do it.
Well, what I remember is, at least for the first fan fiction he made, he did follow off what we knew publicly of what they would have done. So, like, it started with the wedding, and then a couple other story elements he kept in that they talked about. But other than that, it's his original story.
It would be really awesome if we could contact the Davids, right? Paul and Hollis.
Hollis Davids,
The Davids is.
It would be great if we could contact them and pay them to write the conclusion that they never got to. But you're right. I did ask this question earlier, or you asked this question earlier, and you answered that, or Marcel did, and that's when Max and Jay said Sword of the Jedi. So I just realized.
I don't think I answered it earlier, but I'll throw in my answer. Is well, what would I like to see? Storyline continued that was kind of cut off. I would like to see the conclusion of Dawn of the Jedi. I want to see the creation of the Jedi Order. That's really important in the EU. But what story that was maybe not written or canceled that I'd love to see continued would be Mandorla or something like Mandorla. Yeah. I want to see another Vima and Nomi story. I want to see a better link. You know, I know the KOTOR comics did a decent job, but I want to see a better link to Knights of the Old Republic between Tales of the Jedi and Knights of the Old Republic. Yeah,
and explain the Sunrider's absence from the galaxy.
Yeah, you know, and they could even, as much as I disagree with, you know, some of the choices made for SWOTOR, they could tie it into the whole Vitiate story. They, you know, there's
they
things
stumbled upon Vitiate then.
And what about like Thawne too?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I just think that there's opportunity there. The story almost writes itself in a way, and I would love to read that story.
If we're giving multiple answers before Alex goes, because I don't think he went, I'd also like to see the conclusion to Jalib Brandel and Patricia A. Jackson's storyline. What happens to them? What happens to his father? We got kind of a conclusion, but there could be more stories to tell, I guess.
Yeah, from the adventure journals. Yeah.
My answer is not a story that's. It's not necessarily Sword of the Jedi or anything because I don't know exactly what Sword of the Jedi would have entailed. I mainly just want to see the plot threads of Abeloth be completed and the Lost Tribe. If that it could be done in a single trilogy like Sword of the Jedi, that would be cool, but I'm not necessarily asking for Sword of the Jedi just for that plot point to be concluded in some sort of duology or trilogy. It doesn't have to be Sword of the Jedi.
Yeah. The Anzadi trilogy with Troy Denning. Very curious about that. The Anzadi are great villains. They're used in the Republic comics very well, very effectively. They're very interesting. They're made out to be almost like the samurai order. The Anzadi are. They use blades and they train in these monasteries and stuff on this frozen planet is presented in the Republic comics, and it's very interesting. You could take that and expand it so much more. Expand on these shadows that the Anzadi were. You know, Tales from Jabba's Palace, I believe, has an Anzadi. And Tales
reading
from
that right now.
Yeah, nice. I knew you were. And Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina definitely does.
It definitely does.
Some Anzadi. And so we had them, but we never got them fully expanded. So to imagine them being the full villains going up against Luke's new Jedi Order, just like that's very intriguing for me. I hate to say it.
Right? The Republic comics had Volfi Karko, who was the Dark Jedi Anzadi.
There was some Anzadi in Legacy. On Tatooine.
Yeah, they fought Cade.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't the Anzadi those those weird aliens with the man?
Yep, and they eat your brain soup.
Yeah. Theoretically, they live for thousands of years too. I guess they're supposed to be like vampires where they don't really die. So you could have them, you know, in an earlier era, and then you could have some of those same characters, kind of like a crossover, like Cross Current or something, where you have stories in different eras. I think that would be a cool idea for sure.
You just made me remember the Jaden Core duology. I would absolutely love to have further stories after that Jaden Core duology, because they left it to where more novels could have been told about Jaden, the way that they left those novels off.
I got the perfect idea for a book. If there was an Anzadi trilogy, the big bad of that trilogy, show that guy or girl or whoever living through different eras in the Star Wars universe. You know, like show them alive during SWOTOR, show them alive during the Banite Wars, show them alive during the prequels, and like where are they now, kind of thing. How they've built up their resources and secret. You know, maybe they have like this crazy nihilistic worldview or something like that. I think that would be a great novel.
But the fact that since you're so old, that the way you perceive things and like the way you view, like you said, that nihilistic worldview, that would be really cool. Like you can like get so many like weird resources and artifacts because you know you've been around for so long. So much possibilities.
Speaking of people living for a long time, any sort of story around Set Hearth after the Bane trilogy, and just
Yeah.
like him with the Endedu holocron, and like, oh my god, I would love that because it says that he's around till the Vong War. So I'm just
That's
like,
New
what the hell
Jedi
was
Order
he
source
doing all
book.
that time?
Yeah. It's the New Jedi Order source book from Wizards of the Coast that establishes
Yeah.
that, right? Yeah.
I'd love to see something with
It would have
Sephiroth
been
because I loved him.
crazy.
He was cool.
I wonder if he came across Darth Krayt at any point, because doesn't Darth Krayt have that holocron? He has a means that he contacts Endedu.
But
So did
Dooku
he-
has it too. In
Yeah,
the Clone
with
Wars.
Quinlan, does Quinlan Voss retrieve that one?
I
Or
don't know.
is he retrieved one holocron for Dooku?
You
Don't
tell
know if it
me.
was that one. Yeah,
Well,
I think it may have been, but it could be some other Sith holocron.
Yeah. So he must lose it at some point, and then
Yeah.
obviously Dooku ends up with it.
Palpatine would probably end up with all the holocrons, at least the ones like in the Jedi Temple. Plus, he probably has the ones from like Dooku's palace on Bakura, or all of his other palaces in Vijun, and all the ones he has in Clone Wars.
Yeah. Now, oh man, I have so many thoughts. My mind's whirling from all the stuff that's been said. One thing I was gonna say is that, oddly, and I know this will sound like sacrilege to Max and Jay and maybe many others, but I think that the Anzadi trilogy to me is more intriguing than the Sword of the Jedi trilogy. And I know that's yeah, but it's just there's so much mystery and potential, I think, for the scale of the story.
Well, how do we know Christy Golden wasn't going to trade off with Troy Denning, and then Troy Denning was going to write the second book with Anzadi combined?
Denning gang.
I mean,
Interesting.
I'd hate an Anzadi trilogy for the simple fact that I hate the Anzadi. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty racist against them, but I think I have a justified reason to be, since their entire existence is to eat your brain juices.
Yeah.
You hate Anzadi, Alex. Like, they make your skin crawl, don't they?
I do. I hate them. I hate them. I hate everything about them. I hate everything they stand for. I hate them. I wish they would all be eradicated.
So
They stick their they slaughter them like animals. They stick their freaking tendrils up your nose, suck your brain juices till you die. I hate them. They don't deserve to exist.
Gonna be Anakin and
No, I'm gonna be. I'm gonna kill them all. They don't. Not one story do they have a redeeming quality. You have that for the Tusken Raiders. You don't.
Yeah.
For the Anzadi anywhere. They all
What about
suck.
the women and what about the women and the children too?
Nah, they go too.
They all go.
This is on brand for Alex. You know, earlier I think like in the stream a few months ago, he's like, Gamorreans aren't people. Let's kill the Anzadi.
With the sole exception of Piggy.
What about
else?
no, not just Piggy. What about the Tail short comic with the Gamorrean? What was his name? Marcel knows the one I'm talking about. Three Against the Galaxy.
Yeah, 3 Against the Galaxy.
What was his name?
Though.
He was great. That guy.
But
he was well-meaning and he cared. He's a person.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Alex,
Yes,
Grissom.
they deserve equal rights too.
Grissom, yeah.
I just have one gripe about Gamorreans. How the name Akbuz is used in multiple stories, and they're not the same Gamorrean. It's like there's one like New Republic diplomat that has the same name, where it's the same name appearing in two stories, but they're not the same person. It's the same thing occurs with one of the Gamorreans. It's also in on the Eye of Palpatine in Barbara Hamley's book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like hearing Alex in school 27 times as I went through high school, middle school, and I'd always turn and look, and it was never me, because there's so many Alexes in the world. So
yeah. If I hear Jay, I just break my neck and be like, "Oh, you talking about me?"
And it's never you. That's the sad thing.
I don't have that problem, guys.
Me neither.
Max is a popular. No.
Well, yeah, but like not Maxine. Like my mom always says, that's an old lady name. And I'm like, yeah.
That's an old lady name.
I know a Maylene. But I know a Maylene, which is a similar.
Yeah. But you know what'll never happen? I'll never get my name on one of those little keychains because they never have Maxine on those things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all the little like personalized name souvenir things. It's always Brendan's. There's never any Brendan's.
Nothing like
Jalen is
Well,
a fairly
name.
Jalen is a fairly popular name ever since like I don't know the early 2000s.
I'm gonna head out. So you all have
All right,
fun.
see you, Alex.
I got
See you, Alex.
Yeah.
chores to do.
I don't.
But
Bye, Alex.
I'm
What?
gonna have to end this soon, anyways. But thank you for joining us, Alex.
This is
Yeah.
a 24-hour telethon until they bring back the EU.
That's an idea for next year on the expandeduniverse.com.
Yeah, I've got a case of Diet Cokes, and I'm just gonna keep chugging them
Now,
until they bring back the
This
EU.
this summer, I had an idea for a stream I wanted to do and have people come in and out of it. Just read the complete Star Wars Encyclopedia, Volume 1. Just read every word of it from cover to cover.
Yes.
See how long it takes and have people pop in and out.
I'll do it.
I'll do it. That sounds fun.
Nice.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll just
Yeah,
be
it's-
Zane the whole time.
I'll just do the preamble for you. I'll do like the today. Will be-
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why are you going to end with volume 1? I mean, could go on.
We'll
forever.
do Volume 2 and 3, of course. But
We could read Dark Empire.
I think doing all 3 of them realistically would take like 40 hours. So I'm gonna try the first one and see if I can get through it all. I have read the first complete encyclopedia from cover to cover.
Base.
I had a bookmark in it and everything. But I just thought that would be a fun idea and have people take turns reading the entries. Who knows?
I got a
Maybe we'll do it.
question. This is really off topic, but I got the Dark Empire trilogy in hardcover today.
Nice. I saw it.
In
You
the
sent a
back of
picture.
it has this here,
Based.
Let me see.
the handbook.
Yeah, the handbook.
Nice.
Which-
That's cool.
yeah, I don't know if I didn't know if that was
How much did you get that for?
$45.
Wow.
That's
price
good for the
hardcover.
hardcover.
So,
Yeah. The
The-
hardcover
the-
is really hard to find.
The Epic Collections also includes the Dark Empire end notes too, and there's some like drawings, some sketch art with it. So that has like the complete everything that's ever been published, including stuff from the single issues. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the letters to the editors, which I wish they would have included.
I also got this. This has loads of EU
Nice.
stuff in it. I've been literally like obsessing over this book since I got it yesterday.
I have an idea for a video from Dark Empire 2. I want to do like one of those like fan videos with like the the romance music in the background. It'd be like Luke Skywalker's first love.
Yeah.
Pictures of him and Jem, Yasana.
Yeah.
Because everybody's always like Luke and Mara, obviously. Luke and Callista, like Matt and Iron Inquisitor. And then I'm going to be like, no, Luke and Jem. Okay, she was the one.
Yeah.
Everybody
Luke
else
can have
settled.
a lot.
He settled for the rest of them. It was always about Luke.
What about
and Jem.
Luke and what about Luke and Lamia?
No.
What about Luke and Danny from the Marvel
another
comics?
No. Yeah.
The
fine.
Zeltron, yeah.
So I have a
Daniel was
question.
More sensitive. Okay.
I have
sorry.
a question for Marcel. So does Jem speak Basic in your version of Dark Empire? Because
Absolutely not.
there is an audio drama where I think she does speak Basic, or at least Luke can kind of understand what she says, I guess, through the Force, but it's narrated with English. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I think after a while in Dark Empire 2, because I just recently reread it like 2 weeks ago, he starts to understand what she's saying through the Force. But originally, she's just talking nonsense Yasana language, and he has no idea what she's saying.
Yeah.
And I think that they fall in love in spite of that. So it's kind of the greatest love story ever told, really, in Star Wars. And I'm gonna make a video about it, like Max.
I can't wait. I can't
I
wait.
think the hilarious part. The hilarious part would just be her speaking gibberish, the Yasana language.
Well, that's hilarious. My friend Fine Editions, Brady, just joined us.
Hello there.
Thank you for joining.
Welcome.
Thank you.
What's up?
To tie back into the original topic slightly, what are your thoughts on this day? April 25th, 2023. 9 years since April 25th, 2014, when the EU was decanonized and discontinued. What are your thoughts today?
Okay, so I remember this day 9 years ago. Of course, that makes me feel old. I think I was working, and I saw that there was an announcement for they masked this with the announcement of the cast for episode 7. And kind of at that time, I was kind of just going with the flow because I was just getting into the expanded universe. But I don't know. Like, I guess my overall feeling about it is it kind of makes me feel old because I remember that day, that time when that stuff was announced. I think I was watching Collider back then, like their Star Wars podcast. But I eventually got bored with the Disney canon, and then I went back to the expanded universe. And then I saw The Last Jedi, and then I was like, okay, now I'm doubling down.
Yeah.
And
it was the Rise of Skywalker for me that did that. That's when I said, all right, no more Disney canon. The EU's better. I'm going to stick with that. That was the catalyst for me. But, sorry, continue.
Oh, but yeah, I'm just. It's very surprising for me that they haven't continued it.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a Marvel 108, which is great, and I believe it sold pretty well.
Yeah, it sold really well. The expandeduniverse.com tracked that, I think, the analytics with that.
Yes. It was probably the first ever new comic book that I bought. I don't know if it was one of the last ones. Definitely the last Star Wars one. But I'm just really surprised that it's been 9 years. People have been asking for it. And Disney hasn't tried to do something. And they throw out Visions, which I liked. I liked Visions. I think some of the stories could fit into the EU, but I don't have any of the books to put on my timeline. But I think if they can do that, why can't we have a Legends TV show and just adapt different stories? So I guess my overall thoughts is I'm just surprised that they haven't brought it back. I think I heard earlier on the stream you guys were talking about like the Spider-Man movie with all the Spider-Man in it. If Tobey Maguire can come back, we should be able to get like EU Luke Skywalker. You know, we should be able to get Waru in the new trilogy. I would go see episode 10 if Waru is in it.
If he was the main villain.
Yes. And it was the same Waru because, you know, he goes through the dimensions.
What if Snoke was Waru?
Best Snoke theory I've ever heard.
I heard people theorizing that Snoke was Jar Jar Binks. I heard Mace Windu. I heard Palpatine. Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
Waru, that's the best one I've heard yet.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I was a kid when all those theories were happening. I believed like 2 or 3 of them.
I personally subscribe to the Darth Plagueis Snoke theory.
You know why I like Waru? Because he's kind of like the TARDIS. He's bigger on the inside.
Yes. And I would love to buy a Lego Waru set.
You made a custom Lego Waru. You can go see that on his channel. Check it out. It's hilarious.
But yeah, like why hasn't it been done yet?
Yeah.
Because they could do so much with it. I feel like they're just creatively bankrupt and they're just ripping off the expanded universe. And then whenever they run out of that, maybe they'll continue it. I don't know.
Empire.
Well, let's continue that topic. Like, why don't we get more expanded universe? What are your guys' thoughts about that? I have my own theory, but I'd like to hear what you guys think. Like at the end of the day, why don't we have more expanded universe? What's the reason?
They barely pay their authors as it is. At least the royalties. So sorry, I didn't mean to intrude, Brendan.
No, it's good. Yeah, that could be they ignored Alan Dean Foster. How many other people for a while at least? How many other people? I think there's been some other people saying they aren't getting royalties. I think there was Alston. Okay, I think there was an Essential Legends collection controversy because some people were theorizing that the original authors weren't getting royalties off of the ELCs, which I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know how that could be true. But I think that the reason why the EU hasn't continued, and this is a controversial take probably, and it doesn't sound very nice, but I think the EU is very superior to Disney canon. So Disney canon doesn't want to continue the expanded universe out of spite for the better, more creative stories, because if they continue those stories, more people will find them and they'll stop caring about their stories.
My thoughts exactly. I feel like if they were to continue with, like, the Solo kids and the Skywalker kids, they, like, fans would be like, all right, so my Luke Skywalker is not a loser, he's not a failure, so they'll be like, okay, so I want more stories with these characters, so let me gravitate towards this side of things. So like I feel like they're like afraid that it would draw away from their stuff, even though it would be making them money as well. So it's like very confusing.
I just listened to, there was an interview with John Jackson Miller, and I think he probably explained it best, that you can't have a like 600-page opening crawl to a movie that is going to make more money. So I think there's a lot of that in there, which if they're creative, they don't have to. They can just be like, here's this, throw you in there.
They can just
well, they could also say Palpatine has returned and just pop up with that,
that's true.
topic in the movie. Don't give any backstory or explanation, but just one quick point about what Maxine said, that the old content was superior. I mean, that could also be said for why they're putting Thrawn and these expanded universe characters in the new canon too, right?
Yeah.
I try not to ascribe any malicious intent to people. I think ultimately these are business decisions that are being made in boardrooms. I think maybe this is not even a topic for them, like an agenda item for them, and it probably hasn't been for a number of years. I think that a very deliberate, conscious decision was made back in the day. I've heard recently that J.J. Abrams was a big proponent behind rebooting the continuity so that he could sort of go off in his own direction. And I guess there was agreement within Lucasfilm regarding that decision. I think that for whatever reason, they've decided to double down on that decision. We saw that most recently with Celebration, that they're doubling down on the sequel trilogy storyline, the post Return of the Jedi storyline that they've created. I don't think that it's spite. I don't think that it's malicious in any way. But I do think that for whatever reason they've decided that this is what they want to do. This is where they want to focus their resources, and I think what it will take for the expanded universe to return is either a change in leadership, a change in sort of like direction for the company, and maybe an acknowledgement or not an acknowledgement, but maybe someone coming in saying like, I believe that we could make more money if we're doing this, because again, they're a business, and I think it all comes down to money at the end of the day. And I think that if someone were to make the business case for it and convince them, because, a bunch of fans on a YouTube live stream are not going to convince them that the expanding universe is going to be more profitable. But if someone were to go in with numbers and charts and make the business case as to why it'd be more profitable, I think that, maybe that would be some insider from Del Rey or Marvel or Dark Horse. I think that we might see more movement. I'm just not sure that would happen in any event under the current leadership, because I think that there's just a lot of momentum right now to continue with the new stuff. And, I don't know who is behind that. It would have to be pretty high up, I would think. But I do think that the story group, for better or worse, has a lot of influence in terms of the way things are shaped. Maybe not necessarily in terms of reining Filoni in if he decides to contradict some things that go on in the books and the comics for his shows, But I do think, like we've seen statements from Pablo Hidalgo on Twitter and Jason Fry about how they how they envision the new timeline and how they wanted to treat it and that and so on and so forth. And I think that they have a lot of influence in terms of the decisions that are being made, so that might be part of the reason why there's that roadblock. But I don't think it's any one answer. Sorry, that's a very long-winded answer, but I think there's a lot of elements.
I have a lot of thoughts on what you've said. I definitely see a lot of your points. I think for the expanded universe to continue, there needs to be a vast restructuring of power, like you've said. We need,
for sure.
Now, fans have been yelling and screaming for years for Kathleen Kennedy to go for this reason or that reason, but I genuinely think her going would have a power vacuum effect. Dave Filoni claims to be an expanded universe fan. We've not really seen that to be the case, but if he went up, would this change anything? We don't know. It would be scary if Dave Filoni was president of Lucasfilm,
Yes.
but we'll see what happens there. But
Also,
oh no, go ahead.
Jay has to give his.
Yeah, I really got to. People who say that Dave Filoni should be the head of Lucasfilm is just so stupid because there's so much more to being the head of Lucasfilm than being a storyteller and director. Like there's business logistics to all of that I don't think Dave Filoni's equipped with. And then secondly, people who say, "Oh, we should fire Kathleen Kennedy," I'm sure whoever they replace Kathleen Kennedy with is not going to change shit. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but
Or even might make it worse.
Yeah, you never know. So
Kathleen Kennedy's a businesswoman, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Dave Filoni, like you said, is a storyteller supposedly. So
animator person.
Yeah,
Kathleen Kennedy has a directing history, right? I mean, she worked with George Lucas.
Yeah.
And Steven Spielberg.
She's real big in Hollywood.
Steven Spielberg, yeah.
Yeah, she's really big in Hollywood. My thing is Kathleen Kennedy, she's the scapegoat. She's the scapegoat for So whenever something goes bad, they can associate it with, oh, this was Kathleen Kennedy. Where we don't really know a lot of the behind the scenes stuff where it's, all the other business related stuff where there's people behind the scenes doing shit. We don't know.
Do you think
what were you gonna say?
Do you think if Pablo Hidalgo was out of Lucasfilm, things would change? Because I feel like a lot might come from him as well. I know he's been wanting to reboot for years before the reboot. But what do you guys think about that? I feel like he kind of has an agenda with the reboot. I don't know about now.
I think he's definitely plays a role in being part of the problem. But I feel like with Pablo Hidalgo working with the right people, I feel like he could have a redemption arc.
Yeah.
I don't think. Sorry, Jay. Go ahead.
He could be a force of good for good. I mean, because he's knowledgeable.
I think Pablo genuinely likes the EU.
Yeah,
but he's not allowed to say that, and so he's very, very anti-EU seemingly. And I'm not. What I was saying earlier, Jay. I totally agree about your points. Kathleen Kennedy being replaced isn't going to change really anything, and it could make it worse. But what I do think is that if she was replaced, there could be a power vacuum that has a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
So it's not the act of her being replaced that could change things for good, but it might be a catalyst that leads to things down the road. Different decisions, new ideas. Yeah.
Well, one thing I just wanted to bring up. About Pablo before we move off the subject, just because I feel like I've thought about this a lot recently because of the interview that we did with Mr. Beidler. I do think that Pablo likes the EU. He created a bunch of the EU. I think I was reading Fate of the Jedi Allies the other day, and he created Klaatuin, right? But I do think that maybe he. Yeah, it's a good book. I think that maybe he kind of looks at it differently than a lot of us do, right? He looks at it as stories, within a, but I don't think he envisions it as like a separate timeline. I don't think he ascribes the same importance to it that we do. And I think he sees Star Wars just as an amalgamation, a collection of stories and myths. That's my own take on it. Maybe completely wrong. I never met the guy.
And he doesn't. And you're saying he doesn't care then which continuity it's from. He just sees it all as stories within the mythos.
Well, and I think he's fully into the the Disney timeline and the Disney canon and the way that they view Legends EU materials as things that they can draw on for inspiration.
Right.
Yeah.
Why don't we ask Star Wars Theory to call him? He apparently has his phone number.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Sorry, Scott. What were you going to say?
I don't think Pablo. I think we ascribe Pablo to be this like higher up in Lucasfilm, and I don't think he is. He's more kind of behind the scenes. He even says himself he doesn't have much influence on Twitter. Dave Filoni, he may get ideas from the EU, but I don't think he really gives a shit about continuity. I mean, excuse the language, but going back to what Marcel said about why they don't continue the EU as like a book and comic storyline, it's more than it just being profitable, right? They decided not to do it because they have limited resources, and it's like this or that. Which project's going to be more profitable? They put more value in their new canon stories, and they think that's going to be the more profitable thing. Mm-hmm. Not to say that the EU wouldn't be profitable. In fact, we know the expanded universe has value because Twin Suns tried to buy the rights of the short stories, and they said no. They didn't want to give that up, and that proves that it's valuable to them. They consider this an asset. It's just for whatever reason they don't decide to use it, at least not yet. Yeah. So I think for us, on this day, Death Star Day, continuing the expanded universe, we have to kind of keep that in the back of our heads, like what strategies, what tactics can get them to realize that, to put the EU not on the back burner, but more of like a front and center, like continuing storyline, not just the drips and drabs that we get from Old Republic MMO and that sort of thing.
Now, like what more can we do? It's very hard. We've done billboards. All of us went out in full force to buy Heart of the Jedi when it went up on Amazon. And the data and analytics for that, it outsold several new canon books on the bestsellers list on Amazon.
Why don't we just protest in the street?
Well, there were a couple things that made the situation more dire and made my realization of the situation dire. One is like Marvel 108. Matt Wilkins did a poll a couple months back, and no one really cares to read it. Like most of the people didn't even read Marvel 108. So if most expanded universe fans, at least more than 50% that even care to follow, Matt Wilkins on YouTube, no disrespect to Matt Wilkins, of course, but if our base doesn't want it, who's going to advocate for it? That was a realization. And the other realization was just the main line on Twitter nowadays, that the idea that Lucasfilm is going to somehow mess up the expanded universe. I mean, Disney bought Star Wars. If you look at the dates, 2012. So there were a couple of years, a year and a half or so between that and 2014. Now you could argue the material at that time that was coming out wasn't that great. I would tend to agree with that to some extent, but it certainly wasn't the woke stuff that you see now. The ideas that people don't like the Disney stuff. It's not that kind of content. So I think there's a lot of problems with that theory. And also in 2014, people weren't saying that. That was a idea that was sort of adopted from the Phantom Menace. People are right to follow the Phantom Menace if they want to, but I don't think those tactics, those ideas should necessarily correlate to the expanded universe movement, if you consider there being such a thing.
Didn't they try to soft reboot the expanded universe in 2012?
I mean, they sort of made it accessible. So the comic storylines, the Brian Wood series, that could be considered a soft reboot. But the other stories, I mean, the other books, the the Han Solo book, the Razor's
Honor
Edge
Among
book.
Thieves, yeah,
Yeah,
Razor's
I mean, they were included in all the expanded universe reference guides and that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to say it didn't count, that goes against everything that they published and officially stated that this is an expanded universe book. I mean, it's in the timeline on the Del Rey inside cover and all that. So
it's even in the essential reader's companion.
Right.
Yeah.
Or at least Razor's Edge was, because Honor Among Thieves wasn't released yet.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe they tried to make it work then? And because I know some of those didn't sell as well as some of the like Legacy and stuff.
Randy Stradley always said toward the final years that the stuff that wasn't continuity heavy sold better than the stuff that was continuity heavy. Now, I don't know what he means by that, because as far as comics, by that point, the really only continuity heavy storyline as far as comics was maybe Legacy. Right. I mean, Republic had ended for years by then. You had Dark Times, but maybe he means like once they went past issue 100 with like the Republic storyline, because you could argue Dark Times was the continuation of the Republic storyline, that nobody was following it at that point. I tend to disagree, because Quinlan Voss was kind of an interesting character, and the idea was for him to come back, whether he showed up in the Underworld TV show or something like that. So I don't know how true that is, but that's what he said anyway.
Yeah. Well, these have been some very interesting thoughts. We're coming up on 2 hours for this. I'm going to have to get heading out. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
No problem.
And thank you, everyone, for giving their thoughts. Our fallen comrades, Alex and Lance. And thank you to Max, Jay, and Brady for joining us later.
Thank you.
And thanks, of course, to Marcel and Scott for being here, everyone in the comments. I think this has been very interesting, and I've had a lot of fun talking with everyone, hearing everyone's takes. It's always very fun, and it was great to do. Great to talk about this on this day. I think I'm going to do this next year as well for 10 years. Hopefully things will have changed by then. You know, maybe we'll see things have changed by then, maybe not, but we'll keep doing it every year until the EU continues. So we will remember this day. And Marcel?
Here's a proposition, if anyone from the inside's listening, I will cosplay as Ahsoka Tano. Give up Legends material on my channel, and I will leave it up for all time. I will do the Montreals. I will do everything.
The face paint.
Yeah. So if anyone on the inside wants to see that, even just for the roles, then give us a book. Give us some.
Yeah.
We're gonna hold you to that.
This was a perfect brainstorm session for planning, idea development, everything. Like Lucasfilm should be listening.
I'm almost wanting the EU to continue now, just so Marcel can do Ahsoka cosplay. No longer is it for the EU continuing. Now I just need to see that.
They watch
this, better continue for that,
and then they release Escape from Dagu.
I almost don't want it to continue now, so I don't have to do this.
Too late. Can't take it back.
Take one for the team, Marcel.
Yeah, exactly. Take one for the team.
I would base myself on that. So
I think there will be a big difference after next year, because I kind of feel like with the release of the new Indiana Jones movie that Kathleen will probably go into retirement or something. I don't know what you guys think about that, but
perhaps
because that's kind of the big.
Inevitably, it will happen.
You're right. That would be something, a good end note. Hopefully the movie's good, but yeah.
I think the movie might be pretty good.
It'll be funny, hopefully.
James Mangold is a good director, and I think it looks solid.
I was surprised how good the trailer footage I saw was. Looks to be better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull based on the trailer footage, but we'll see. Who knows?
I hope it goes the direction that Quality Autism says it's going to go, with the time traveling Nazis. But, but yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for talking EU, and it was a blast. And I'll be ending the stream now. Thanks everyone for joining in the comments
you.
and for the panelists. A lot of fun. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.